how are you? And welcome to the first day of the Foundational Grammar Series. I'm Maureen Turnbull-Arbelu, the founder of Prepare Integrative Language Coaching, where we empower people to transform their lives through English. And today we're going to talk about the present tense. This series is all about looking at the question that common knowledge is not necessarily common practice. So, how do we use the present tense in English? Well, first of all, we use the present tense when something's a habit and when we do something often. So, for example, you're going to hear often the question, how often? How often do you do something? How often do you do something? I brush my hair every day. I eat breakfast every morning. I always drink water. I always drink liters and liters of water. I never say never. That's a lie. I say never, but I try to never say never. I sometimes say never, to tell you the truth. So we use all of those words. Those are our key words for the present. Those words of habitual actions. Those words of regularity, right? So that's when we're going to use the present tense. Key number one, not when you're doing something, but when you're describing. When you're describing something that you do on a regular basis. That's key number one. And key number two, the important thing for you to know about the present tense is that the conjugation is actually pretty easy. We say I, you, we, they, do, have, dance, eat, sing, run, talk, almost everything. And the key trick when we're talking about the present tense is what we do with he, she, and it. We had an S or an ES. So, she dances, he eats, she walks, it breathes, right? We add that S or ES. So those are the key, I think the two key tips that you need to remember when using the present tense in English. We use it for habitual actions and add the S and the ES with he, she, and it. In English, it's pretty easy, right? We don't have to remember a lot of irregulars. So for the most part, for example, I say I dance, eat, and sing. She dances, eats, and sings. So usually we just add that S or ES. Of course, we have a few irregulars, and I think the most important ones would be do, I do, she does. Have, I have, she has. Those two we're going to use a lot. Another one we're going to use a lot is go. I go, he goes, right? And maybe study, for example. I study, she studies. Some of those Y's, we're going to use IES. But for the most part, we don't really have a lot of irregulars. So I hope that makes it very often. We're going to use that word often. Often means with what regularity, with what frequency, right? So I'm going to say how often, and then I use the question form. Now, many people ask me, well, why do you use do and why do you use does in a question? Well, do and does at the beginning of a question doesn't mean fazer. We can just see it as like a signal that it's a question. Of course, in English, we can use we can go up at the end. And I tend to use a lot of voice inflection, period, but especially because I'm a teacher. But in English, we don't rely on the voice inflection to know if it's a question. I do say something like, right? You can tell it's a question. But for the most part, we use words to indicate a question. So that do or does at the beginning of the question indicates that it's a question. So what do I mean? If I want to know the regularity you do something, I'm going to ask, how often do you dance? I don't have to go dance. No, dance. How often do you dance? How often do you ride your bike? And then if it's he, she, or it, I'm going to use the does. How often does she dance? How often does she ride her bike? Maybe I don't know if you do something or not. So I'll ask you, do you dance? And I'll ask, does she dance? Right? And of course, you can always give a long answer, but remember, we've talked about this in English, time is money. So if I ask, do you dance? You can say, yes, I dance. I dance. Or you can say, yes, I do. Or just yes, right? Time is money, so usually we say, yes, I do, or yes. Of course, you can give a longer answer. So if I ask, does she dance? Your answer is going to be, yes, she does. Or she does. Yeah? Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes it a little simpler. It's not easy, but it's not so difficult, right? So really that's how we can ask all the basic questions in the present tense and find out so much information about anyone. We can ask somebody what they do, how often they do it. Yeah? So go ahead and practice that. One of the best ways to practice is to just go through your schedule. So go ahead and do this as an activity tonight and for the next couple weeks to practice and increase your vocabulary. Go ahead and write down all of the things that you do on a daily and on a weekly basis. Go ahead and write, on Mondays, I dance. On Mondays, I eat breakfast, I go to work, I wash the dishes, and I watch a movie. And then talk about somebody else in your family, in your household, somebody else you know, to practice the other part. He reads his book. On Monday, he washes the clothes. He makes the bed. He makes dinner, right? And then you can practice both using I and using somebody else. So try that activity. I hope that helps, and I hope that clears it up and makes it a little bit easier to understand how to use the present tense and ask questions in the present tense. So with that, have a wonderful day. It's such a pleasure to talk with you, and I can't wait to talk with you again very soon. Much light, much love. See you later.